So this is about the present state of trying to tell stories in games, and especially, you know, we wanted this program to have kind of an arc. You know, we talk about, you know, the deep questions and where things could be going, but then tomorrow everyone has to go back to work except me, to actually try and make this happen. And it can be very difficult if you work in a company where people, you know, you're maybe the only game designer or the only game designer who believes in storytelling, and that's kind of a problem. You know, so and it's also hard if you're really passionate about this and you want to join a company. You know, which company do you go to? So that's something I wanted to talk about. And actually, the first question would be, because actually someone in the audience asked this, like, if you're interested in this and you're not already working in the games industry, how would you go about trying to join the games industry and do storytelling? Ooh.
I can try and start. Don't try to enter it as a writer. Try to enter it as a writer something else as well. That you need to know design anyway, or you shouldn't be writing games. So that's helpful. Or a writer artist or a writer programmer, because those are skills they understand. And what you need to show them, I mean, BioWare, of course, they want you to use their Aurora engine to do some storytelling, and they look at that. They won't, I think they may actually allow you to do something on paper now, but that's at least what they pretend, but they really want to see that you understand interactivity. Be part of a team, one of these small teams we've been talking about now that do iPhone games or Facebook games, and be the writer and be on a team where they actually understand what that is. And then you can say, look, I did this, because no one who hires you has much imagination, and they need to see exactly what it is you can do or hear.
Yeah, that's actually an email I get somewhere between 3 and 5 times a week, roughly speaking. And the advice I give people is generally, one, build a portfolio of game writing, not just writing, game writing. You know, write systemics, get your hands on a tool set, write stuff that's actually going to go into a game. Demonstrate that you're interested in genuinely writing for games, not writing in games looks like the medium that will actually be most likely to pay your bills while you're doing it. I highly recommend thinking about the writing and the storytelling, the narrative aspects of a game while you're playing it, instead of just being a passive consumer. Always analyze as you're playing the games, being able to talk about it intelligently. What makes a game have good narrative in your opinion, or not such a good narrative in your opinion. I highly recommend getting involved with communities of people who are doing this professionally. The IGDA Game Writers Special Interest Group. I'm very welcoming to students and people who are getting interested in the industry. Very helpful in providing leads and talking to people and just getting them up to speed, providing recommended reading lists, things like that. I recommend going to conferences like this one or the Game Narrative Summit in Austin, which has this thing that I'm like on a board of. But meeting people who are doing this professionally and getting to pick their brain on a moment-by-moment basis is absolutely invaluable. Becoming part of that professional community is invaluable, not just because, well, you get to be around people who do this for a living and pick up their habits and their professional techniques and things like that, but also, to be blunt, nepotism is the best way to get a job. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that a lot of times when there's a writing task, the first thing that's going to happen, someone's going to say to the person who's lead writer or narrative designer, hey, do you know anybody who can pick up this stuff? And being somebody who's known for doing good work and is known for having potential, that's a better way to get in the door than just randomly shooting out resumes. I mean, you have to do that. You have to keep on trying. You have to keep on knocking on doors as well. But demonstrating that you know your stuff, that you can do it well, that you're not a jerk, and that you're interested in doing this professionally in every sense of the word is invaluable in ultimately getting your foot in the door, I think.
I'm not really well equipped to answer this question, so I'm going to. Because what I did was non-traditional, which is I started a company doing something unusual. And you know, the indie route is still a way in. Advice there, I think, is make sure it's something you can do on your own, double up on skill sets, you know, get one other person maybe who can help you with things, or if you're lucky enough to have some sort of budget of your own, maybe chase that. But being able to do everything on your own is ideal, is really important. And then being prepared to feed your entire life into the blender is absolutely essential. I worked 12-hour days. I think my business probably ate my marriage, and probably worth it. But everybody says when you're starting a business, appreciate how much hard work it is. And I'd heard that for years. I didn't fucking get it, because every problem is your problem until you have a team. And you don't have a team until you're lucky enough to get an investment, which nearly nobody does, or to bootstrap up to an operating model, which most people don't. So, you know, going your own route can be very rewarding, but be prepared to put your life in the blender.
Hello. Okay. These are very valuable advices, and the thing I'm going to say to you is that don't listen to me, because I have not do something that is quite graspable by rational minds right now. Just to give you a little background of what I'm doing, I'm coming from Wonderland and the dream. I'm not from this reality, and I didn't know about scripts and code until 5 years ago. I was mainly a writer, a cartoonist, and poet, and I was doing things with kids in the street, and I was trying to stage an uprising against reality through games, because I deeply believed that game and play can be a way to reverse authority, and this was always a big concern when, as a young kid, I saw the world crumbling. So what I did to enter the industry is actually kill myself. I wanted to make games so bad that I was willing to accept the worst fate you can deserve, meaning a tester for Nintendo. I went to the Frankfurt factory where they kill your soul and replace it with Yoshi in your mind. My little imaginary friend, this little really cool singular thing inside my head living there, was destroyed, killed, raped by you know what. And I stayed there 6 months, and then I died in my mind. And it was like, this is video games, this is what I'm supposed to get. How to kill myself, how to destroy my dreams, how to crunch my soul into this thing. And well, the fate helped me, because I actually found people who were willing to listen to the kids in me saying that we can actually try to change the world. I'm not saying we are going to change the world. The world is not going to change, it's going to die a lot of times. It's the end of the world every day now, and it will be forever, probably. And how do we adjust to the end of the world? And so this was the discourse that I had with the CEO of a company called Ankama, which is like pretty much one of the biggest company in France right now. It's hosting the game called Dofus and Wakfu, which is like millions of players. And they told me, well, do your thing. And I said, what do you want me to do? Well, what you can do is try to make it alive. And then there it was, under my fingers, this thing I wanted to do is to create matter, to create energy, to create something that has a weight and a mass in time, in space, and texture that could be there forever, and where people can actually feed on, you know. And so they said, okay, try it. So I did, and it's been 4 years now, and now the game is coming out, hopefully soon. It's been in beta for 3 years, and it's kind of, the word has grown on the beta. And I was just there as a narrative designer to document the rising of the soul of the people there and what happened there. So I'm kind of saying to everybody here, portfolio is great, the indie way is great, faith is most important, I think, and dreams, of course. Well, we'll see when the game is out. I don't know about that.
All right, thanks. No, that was wonderful. How much is the struggle of trying to tell stories dependent on company culture and you know, is it something where if the culture is right, then it's great, or if you set up your own company, then it's great, but if the company doesn't value storytelling, then, you know, is it even worth trying? You know, is it, if you know what I mean?
I guess I'll jump in this one. Obviously, having a company culture that believes in storytelling is valuable for doing it well, because that means you'll get more resources, more time, more chances to iterate, things like that. But even if you're dealing with a company culture that doesn't believe in it, potentially all it takes is one person in a creative director role or a production role whom you can collaborate with to find a space for doing some narrative work. Obviously, the more people who believe in it, the more the company culture is behind it, the more chances and opportunities and the bigger toolkit that you're going to have to do it with. But there's always, I think, even a crack in the sidewalk where something can sprout up. It's just a case of being willing to look for it, and being willing to look for it potentially sometimes in unusual places.
Having given my rant already this morning, you can, in just about any company, do your work as a professional. Having written for Charlie's Angels, I guarantee that there's just about nothing you can't find some worth in. And I think that prepared me for the most recent experience, because that's who you are. I need to write. Writing is what defines me, and the fact that people are stupid enough to pay me to do that is just gravy. And I can write just about any place, or at least I thought until this last game. But you have to do it for your soul. They may try to kill it, but hopefully you can resist. And so far I've been successful. I've been doing this for a long time, and I still have bits and pieces of my soul left.
On this particular point, there is something I learned from observing people in my company working, is that it would have been maybe easier for me if I just stand as a writer and not a game designer. I was too jaded by game design at this moment that I wanted to put my hand in this. I wanted to learn scripts. I wanted to learn a new way to think about reality, like procedurally and assemble everything. I don't think like this. I think like in nodes and whatever chaos you can imagine. But I needed this thing because it was so beautiful, because from the constraint comes freedom, right? And because you can engineer whatever you want with the things people think are stale and solid. So it was like, for me, I wanted to be a game designer. I wanted to be in my team and say, hey guys, I'm not a writer. Forget about my books, forget about my comic books, forget about everything I did. Just consider me, please, as a game designer. I need it for my soul. I need it for me because it's so cool to be there now. You know? Well, it was very tough because they give me hell, especially coders. And it was like, I ended up admitting that code is probably the most important thing you got to get if you want to make video games today. But now I can say to them, okay, I did that boot camp for 4 years. I know Lua now, I know to script things, I know whatever you want, but no, please let me write, okay? Please let me be the guy in the coffee shop giving you this ugly piece of paper at the end of the day, not engineered on a tool, something on paper with pen. You know, I want to be your analog paradox. I want to be, you know, and it was really tough at the beginning because it was just like, I mean, renouncing the thing, the dream, this game designer, Eldorado, whatever. And it was probably, that's maturity in a way. It's like, do what you do, you know, do. But you need to understand, maybe to pass through this gateway of hell to understand what it means to make interactivity in design. It was, I mean, I would not change anything, but it was tougher than maybe if I would have just said, I'm a writer, everybody would have left me alone. You know, the guy who doesn't play ball with the other and say, yeah, I want to play ball with you guys, it's cool. No, you're a writer, come on. Just write. Yeah. Okay, that's what I do.
So Yeah, actually, I find that my role when I'm writing is getting more and more integrated with everybody else on the team, because my line of dialogue is not a line of dialogue. My line of dialogue is an asset that's also tagged to a sound file, that's also tagged to an animation, that's also tagged to an effect, that's also tagged to a script file that tells me when it's going to get played, that's also tagged to all the localized files that go with it. And so I'm not operating in a vacuum. I can't operate in a vacuum. And this has been very interesting for me creatively, because I came out of tabletop, and my original composition method was to lock myself in a dark room, preferably set something on fire, listen to some really bad prog rock, drink a lot of caffeine, and then churn out 10,000 words a night. And this was, it worked within that particular medium because that's what that medium required. But I had to revamp my process when I understood that what I'm doing now is part of this larger whole, part of this larger construction. By definition, it has to be collaborative. And when you find good people to collaborate with, it actually reinforces the writing, makes the writing a lot better. It's just a matter of keeping that in mind, that you are no longer writing for yourself, by yourself. It's that you are part of this engine that is delivering all of the narrative assets to the player in the context of the game.
Some things about starting small and building a team who's, in a much overused word, passionate about this sort of thing. Somebody once told me that when you build a company past 5 people, you inevitably get one person who doesn't really care about what the company does. That 5 is the kind of golden number. So we're just hitting 7 now, we're about to find that out. But we've been at 5 for about a year, and that's worked out really well. It's a nice core committed team. We started out very distributed, and I made a big deal, which has worked out, of getting everybody in the same room at least once every couple of weeks, and preferably more often. I tend to talk about mammal warmth, which my co-founder hates. He said it makes him feel queasy. But there is something about interacting with people in the same room rather than over email. It's not just wider bandwidth, it's not just a better kind of conversation, but it means that people don't get pissed off with each other in the same way. It means people understand each other better. And pragmatically, because what we've done from the beginning has been what we really wanted to do, and because we've been lucky enough to find out what we really wanted to do pays, we notice there's a real correlation between the quality of the work we put out and the appropriateness of the work we put out and how much money we have at the end of the month. Now, we're lucky that we don't have sort of an aggressive financial officer, because this is, my thing, and I run the company, so I'm already persuaded by it. But the fact that our pride in our work ties directly into our bottom line is a tremendously useful, powerful, and encouraging, motivating factor. And I think it's necessary to take this stuff far too seriously. I mean, both the consistency of the story, the world background, the themes, the style, all this stuff. You need to be a colossal nerd about. I think that's enormously useful. And I think pretending to be a real company from day one, even when you're not, calling yourself a writer, even when you barely earned a quid from writing, not putting everything in inverted commas, taking everything seriously and far too seriously, has been really useful to us. Every time we've taken things far too seriously and it hasn't worked out, and we felt at the end of it it's a little bit daft, every time we've been sane about stuff, we've regretted it later.
All right. This is kind of the present of storytelling in games, maybe. What do you guys think of Transmedia? Fad?
This one is for me. Ankama, the company I'm working for, has been deemed a transmedia empire now. Someone told that earlier during the conference, like, transmedia is just a buzzword that's been around for the last 10,000 years, probably. And it's not called transmedia at all. It's called, well, you know what it's called, of course. And maybe reality in a way is transmedia. I mean, it is all different behaviors and patterns that we can use to talk to each other and interact or express whatever. The core idea here is to understand that transmedia is not a business plan or a type of game. It is a process. It is something that is useful for narrative design process, actually, because it's how do we create a word based on architecture and not on stories? And this is the core issue. There is the differentiation, the re-differentiation between plot and narrative, and especially. And I'm not talking generally. I'm talking about specifically virtual words, and I'm not talking about scripted games or whatever. But I'm just talking about living real-time entities. And the core of transmedia is the word model. Is the idea that the word that we create and the structure with words and verbs and gestalts and archetypes and all these tools that you've been talking about all day, are perfectly valid tools, are all at the service of creating this, engineering this life inside a word that is not here, but that needs to acquire mass, weight, in order to matter and to exist in reality. So this is actually what people, when I say that, especially in France, they say, "You crazy guy, you're just crazy, you don't do..." A virtual world is a virtual world. Well, when you talk about it with people who live in these huge transmedia universes, it's not that easy to dismiss the fact that they live in these worlds. I mean, they relate to each other through these words. When they meet in real life, I mean, I can see that from Dofus. I mean, the Dofus conventions are, it is something to behold, really. Just like you can, like 1,020, 200 kids alone in a room with computers and no one to watch them. Yeah, I'm honest, the staff is just here to reboot the computers when they bug. It's the only thing. And this guy organized themselves with flags and little messengers running from guilds to guilds, and they just have their names, and their class, and their levels. And it's crazy. So that's transmedia now is debated as a form-obsessed media way of telling things, but it's just about, I mean, what is the bigger sum of our collective souls? I mean, what is above? I'm using faith and above. I'm not a God guy, but I do believe in the invisible threads that links together what we see and what we experience, and video games can be so powerful in bridging that gap between visible and invisible, because the pixel is real, it is here, it is matter, it is texture, it is formal imagination. And this transmedia is formal imagination in motion, in a way. So that's fine.
So I think I agree with what David said, but slightly less poetically. Who here considers themselves a geek? Okay. A demi-geek?
A what?
Demi-geek? So I think transmedia is geek going mainstream, basically. I think the essence of being a geek is enthusiasm, and probably inappropriate enthusiasm. And it's that enthusiasm for a story or a world that's invented and that overflows the boundaries and makes you want to do stuff beyond the edges of the story. That drives, creatively, transmedia stories. Maybe not commercially. There's a whole argument about this that I don't pretend to understand and won't get into. But I think enthusiasm for a story, which is really, I think, what you were saying, is at the heart of it. And we're now well into the transmedia backlash now. You know, every time you say the word, you have to excuse yourself and say it's a buzzword, and we presumably hit another backlash against the backlash in a moment, the same way we did with gamification. So, you know, let's roll with that. Let's be cynical about it while we still need to be. But let's bear in mind that ultimately we're talking about enthusiasm.
I'm going to disagree with both of you. Transmedia, for me, is a set of tools that allows you to deliver a story. It is Twitter, it is Facebook, it is websites. When we make ARGs, we are using transmedia, and they are all windows into the story. It doesn't I'm sorry, it doesn't have anything to do with virtual worlds. I don't think it has anything to do with enthusiasm. It's simply a package of delivery systems. And like anything else, these delivery systems some will fade, some will continue, they will change. Transmedia has been with us for a long time. I like transmedia is the hacked road sign that I showed in my talk. It is all the different ways in which you can tell story, and it's nothing more.
I'm going to split the difference between the two factions here, and I'm also going to point out that Transmedia is actually Sonic the Hedgehog tie-in novels. But I look at Transmedia really as methods for delivering story, but without the enthusiasm for more story, without the enthusiasm for finding out more about these worlds, without the enthusiasm for finding out things that you can't get from the original medium that the narrative is presented in, then there is no call for Transmedia.
Whoa. You can present the original material through Transmedia. You don't confuse it with marketing or cross-media. All right?
I always thought the difference between cross-media and transmedia was the difference between cross-dressing and transsexuality, actually. In one way, you put your clothes on and pretend to be something, and on the other one, you cut the balls, you know. So it's more about-
We have now earned, most interesting talk of the afternoon. I really I look at what was held up as the apex of Transmedia a couple years ago, which was Heroes, which was for that brief shining moment. Okay, it was a television show, and they had all these surrounding stories that they told about it through the romance novel, through the comic book, through the website, through ARG stuff, and all these things, all of which came, I thought, out of the enthusiasm for the original material, which reinforced it, which helped build more enthusiasm for the world. There are other techniques of storytelling that built on the initial concept that was there. The fact that it sort of fizzled out and died, that was a question of potentially the execution, but my feeling has always been that Transmedia is different ways to tell a story, just that potentially the story has to start somewhere.
And that each one of these pieces of the story should be appropriate to the medium that you're using. A lot of people misunderstand and try to put the same piece of story in several different things. And
Appropriate and
that's a major
integrated.
mistake. Appropriately integrated.
Yeah.
This is probably why we disagree about this. I'm not as experienced or as a savvy on these issues as you can be, guys. But the thing I'm seeing is that we're still talking about stories, and I'm not talking about stories at all. I'm talking about words. I'm talking about context. I'm not talking about things that happens in the context that can be challenging for a character, or I'm not even talking about characters at all. I am talking only about things that can create a reality for anything and can engineer anything in them. So your vision is perfectly valid. It is a window, it is a medium, it is a form window on, and this is my difference, not on stories, but on parallel words. And this is why maybe I am too poetic or maybe too out of my mind to think of this. It's because I do think that when we experience a virtual world through transmedia, being like comic books and novels and games, what is the material, the original material? What it is if it's not a story? What it is if it's not, okay, I have this Star Wars story, and then this is a story word. Star Wars is a story word. I mean, I have a story, a span story, and then I have these windows, form windows, medium windows on this huge sprawling epic. But what if there is no epic? What if the epic is the landscape? What if the epic is the actual gestures between people? What is, this is the kind of things we are trying to push forward. Is there is no story in Dofus. There is like one huge meta structure for the mythology, but there is no core story happening in the world. Everybody just make things up, as they go, and they are fine by this, because we tolerate the thing that beauty cannot exist, and collective art is not beauty. It is what they do, and we have to acknowledge them. That's the whole amateur debate now. I mean, who are we to tame beauty, to design beauty? I cannot design beauty. Beauty is emergent, in my sense.
So maybe it's about sort of a narrative context, and it doesn't have to be like the original story, such as in Star Wars, for instance?
Yeah, well, I think this is the difference between a story word and a world model. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know I'm going to troll everybody there with Avatar because it's always the same thing. I'm quoting Avatar and it's worse than saying that the Showa didn't happen. It's just like, I hated Avatar. I think it's the worst end of what we can accept from 21st century entertainment. But the good point of this thing is that it made money. It made huge gazillion dollars. Who am I to speak against James Cameron? Who am I to say, hey, maybe we should look at this differently? I'm nobody. I'm just this random guy there ranting. So it's kind of, I don't know, I don't think the story is relevant anymore to structure the virtual worlds. And once again, I'm not talking about everything else than virtual real-time worlds. I'm not talking about script narrative games, which are fine with story.
Any final words on that? Right. We had the beautiful synthesis and the great metaphor and no?
I don't think I really disagree with Lee, although Lee might disagree with me. I don't know. It's the enthusiasm that drives the desire to consume something through all those different ways. I mean, okay, so that there's always been different ways of telling the same story, but time was people were content to switch off the TV at the end of an episode and not particularly think about it. And it's been the rise of geek and the rise of fandom that's driven the enthusiasm to experience the story in different ways, whether that's live role-playing or some sort of Twitter feed that provides backstory information or tie novels, you know, all these things. And that's the reason people want this, isn't it?
We're, both of you are looking at it in a different way than I look at it. I divide the story up into different delivery mechanisms. I don't start with Star Wars. I don't start with a story. That story is fed to the players in an ARG through a whole bunch of different media. And they do make up the story as they go along. The thing about an ARG that I said this morning is that you have to be flexible because you have to respond to your players. And it has nothing to do with taking a Disney. I worked on Disney's Virtual Kingdom. I know a lot about taking a single property and splashing it across every kind of medium you can. That is not transmedia. Transmedia to me is taking the story and telling it in 30 different ways if you want to. You choose what the media are that you're going to use, and that story can be anything, and it gets transformed by the fact it's like those one-man bands you see performing out on the street corner for spare change. He's playing cymbals at the same time he's playing piano. He's doing all this other stuff. But it's the entirety of the thing. It's also getting over the magic that he can do it in the first place. But it's the entirety of the thing that is the experience, and that's what transmedia is. All
right, I think those are great final words for ending this panel. Please, thank you very much, and please a big round of applause for the speaker.